Hi again, it's Jason from Fraser Valley Rose Farm, and today I have some exceptional footage to show you from a tour I took this week of a farm, vineyard, and garden up in Naramata BC owned by John and Kelly Schroeder. And as I show you some teaser clips here, let me also say that John and Kelly Schroeder were the owners of the perennial nursery that I worked for many years, so it's not surprising that they would take plants on as a passion after their retirement. John was kind enough to give me some time to show me around, and so here's the results of that tour.
So Jason, growing cactus in Canada seems like a very, very strange thing, because most of us, I think when we think of cactus, we think of Arizona and deserts and hot stuff, and we think of cactus that look kind of like this guy right here. This is the golden barrel cactus, and if you've ever been down in Arizona, I'm sure you've seen plants that look like this. And while they're lovely, they're not hardy up here in Canada, and a couple days of freezing temperatures and you know, they'll be dead. So what are we doing growing these in our garden up here in Naramata Zone 5? Well, we've got a special way of making sure they stay alive over winter with the very handy tool. Takes two people actually to do this, but to demonstrate, I'll just take it here. You put this into that clip, you put one into the other side, and then you lift the whole 80 or 90 pounds of it all at once. Wow, that much, eh? Yeah, they're pretty heavy. When you think of this, I mean, it's a big ball, 45 centimeters approximately, and it is almost entirely full of water. So imagine carrying a bucket of water that big. It's going to be heavy. And the cool thing about overwintering cactus is they don't take very much. We put this into the basement of the house, and as long as it's above freezing and it gets a little bit of light, they're perfectly fine.
Just a cool garage then?
Just a cool garage. Anything above freezing, yeah, is fine. So that's what you might think about when you think of cactus. But it's not the kind of cactus that grow native here in Canada. So let's go take a look at some of the cool plants in the garden over here. When I learned about cactus first, I discovered that there are, in fact, 4 species of cactus that are native to Canada. Who would have thought that cactus grows naturally in Canada? In fact, one of the species grows almost as far north as the Northwest Territories. And we've got prickly pear, 2 different kinds, and 3 different kinds actually, and then one of the hedgehog type. And so when we started, you can see the garden laid out here. This is our stock garden where we are able to harvest plants for sale and for propagation. And these plants were put into the ground, I guess, about 10 years ago now. And one of the things that just makes cactus such a fabulous plant for gardens in arid areas and probably just about anywhere where climate change is causing us to have less frequent, more irregular rain. These plants were planted in the ground. I gave them some water the day that I planted them, and they have done this without irrigation for the last 10 years. Which is absolutely astonishing. I mean, just look at how incredibly lush and healthy they look, and all without water, and all in a climate where they get approximately 10 inches to 12 inches of rain per year, which is really not very much.
Wow, and what a lot of color on these, eh?
A tremendous amount of color, yeah. And of course, as with every garden tour, you should have been here last week, because last week they were in full bloom, and now you can see there's a lot of, if you look over here, you can see there's a lot of flowers that are finished, and now we're getting the little fruits that are forming. While we're here, let's look at this guy here. You know, with cactus, you think about spines and hurting yourself because there are spines. This one we call the potato cactus because the pads are kind of rounded shaped like a little potato, and you'll see they don't really have any spines to speak of.
Yeah, I don't see anything conspicuous on there. How about, is there anything prickly on there?
Ah, there is. Yes, there is. Good question. So these look like you just want to touch them, and you could just kind of pick one off. And if you did, you'd be very, very sorry because of something called a glochid. And if you look right there, you can see what looks like a little brown spiky thing. That's not just one little brown spike. That is a whole bunch of tiny little, well, hair-like structures that are actually thinner than hairs with a little barb at the end, and they're called glochids. And glochids are very annoying because if I touch this, I wouldn't even know that I had any glochids. But if I would pick up my hand and look like that, I would see hundreds of these little things. And boy, after a while, they really get annoying, especially if your clothing goes over top of them. And so one of the key tools for working with cactus is a pair of tweezers. There are about 3 tools that are really essential, and we'll show you all of them. But tweezers are very important, and after a day of working out here, you'll see me trying to see those tiny little annoying things and picking them out with a pair of tweezers.
Oh, I'm not going to complain so much about roses and their thorns now.
Oh yeah, roses got nothing on cactus, let me tell you. So,
I mean, I'm just looking at the slopiness here. That's incredible. Lots of hardscape here, and I mean the drainage has got to be perfect here. Would they struggle in a moisture spot?
yes, most cactus really do need to have very well drained soils, especially in the winter. If your cactus have wet feet in the winter, they will not be happy at all. So make sure that if you plant them in an area that does get winter rains, that you plant them underneath an overhang or something that keeps the rain off of them. So here's one of the native cactus. This one is called Opuntia fragilis. And why is it called fragilis? Well,
that sounds like it could break apart easily or something.
yes, so let me just demonstrate here. Well, let me demonstrate with my foot, because that's what often happens. Look at that.
Oh, there you go.
That is why it's called fragilis.
Oh, that's incredible.
Barely need to touch it, and it falls off and to an animal's foot or to a human's, and then it gets carried somewhere and it starts again.
And then it lets go. And now, how hard would it be for that little piece that broke off there to root again and become a new plant?
Okay, well that takes us to the whole question of how do you propagate, and I'll show you a little later the secret to how you make more cactus when you have some cactus in your garden. It's a very, very technical and difficult propagation, so we'll have to have a little lesson on that. So this particular one we were just looking at doesn't have a lot of flowers, and they're relatively small. This one was found in Keremeos, British Columbia, not very far from here. And there has been a lot of hybridization that's happened between some of the native cactus and actually some cactus that caught a ride on wagon wheel trains during the gold rush and came up from California. Wow. And they crossed over with some of the local varieties, and so we have a number of forms that grow here in British Columbia. And when it comes to these prickly pears, you can have some that have really small pads. So you can see with my finger or my hand here, this is really not a very large pad at all. And then we can also have some really, really large pads like we see a little bit higher up the slope.
Oh, now that is big. Well, those got to be about 6 inches.
Yeah, they're about 6 inches, and so
even 8 for some of them.
Yeah, up to 10 inches. And yeah, that's a magnificent plant. This one comes from Arizona somewhere, and it's a very floriferous variety for sure.
And that one is fully hardy here.
Fully hardy. Hardy like a rock, absolutely. And while we're talking about hardiness, this is hardy in Alberta. You can grow that in Calgary and Edmonton. You can grow that in Saskatchewan. And hard to believe, eh? But they will thrive in those kinds of cold climates.
So now I'm just cheating here and getting a shot of the landscape behind you. We're sort of overlooking the Okanagan there.
Yes.
That's Summerland on the other side?
That's Summerland on the other side. Penticton is just to the south, and Beachland is up ahead to the north. This is a little slice of paradise, I think. Naramata is maybe the worst kept secret about the Okanagan. It's a lovely spot, and we just feel very privileged to live here.
It's the place for wine and cactus.
Wine and cactus, yes. Although if you have too much wine and then you go for a walk in the cactus, you might not be very happy. Yes. This is one of my favorite varieties here. It's called Orange Glory, and it's a beautiful orange color. The range of colors in cactus is quite extraordinary, and they're just a beautiful blooming plant. Flowers tend to be large, and they're almost iridescent and neon-like.
And I see the bees are interested.
The bees, yeah, the bees love it for sure. And in fact, there's one kind of, it's either a bee or a fly, I can't remember now, I haven't seen it yet, but emerald green, and they just love the cactus, and it's a nice combination for sure. Now, while we're talking about spines, let's talk about cholla, because we all know, or not all, but cholla is that shrubby cactus that grows down in Arizona, and people like to say that
I'm just getting some scale here.
that's a big plant. Yes, this variety here is 10 years old now, and it'll grow to be 8 feet tall and at least 6 feet across. Cylindropuntia imbricata with beautiful big purple magenta flowers a little bit later in the year. And people talk about the jumping cholla. The idea is that if you get close to it, the spines will actually jump out and get you. And of course, that's not really true. The plant isn't alive. But the reason it feels like it, all you need to do is get close to it, and without even being aware, you'll end up brushing against it, and then you'll have the spines.
So it has a bit of reach.
It seems to have a bit of reach. You can see them, they're. And interestingly enough, from an evolutionary point, spines are just modified leaves. So when the new ones come out in spring, you can see this is just a nice, soft little green leaf, which in another a couple of weeks will turn into these nasty spines that you really don't want to bump into. So nice and soft for just a little while. And why do you think that cactus have to have these spines? I'll give you a secret. That's because in the desert there's not a whole lot of water, and sometimes cattle come along and they are thirsty, need some water, and they'll eat whatever plant is full of water, which of course cactus are. So it is purely a self-preservation.
Defense, and as you said, propagation if it pulls them off of the plant, right?
Yes. Now, I have to warn you, take a look at your shoe. You have clearly demonstrated the fragilis characteristic of cactus because you brushed up against it without even noticing. And no, it did not jump at you. You just bumped into it. And that is a good segue for me to bring out one of the important tools when you have cactus. So just give me a second and I'll pick one up. Here we are back again with one of the important tools. This is a multifunction tool. You can use it in the kitchen and you can use it in the cactus garden. And let me just give you a quick tip. The natural inclination is to grab that thing and pull it off. And let me tell you what happens. As soon as you do, it swings around and you suddenly have 3 spines poking you in your finger. And the more you try to get rid of it, the more it's like Brer Rabbit in the tar pit. It just keeps on holding. So you need one of these.
And pull straight out?
Pull straight out. So I told you this was a multi-purpose tool. So let me show you another function. When you're working with cactus, what you really don't want to do is have to do a lot of weeding, because weeding cactus isn't a whole lot of fun. And for that, this tool works very well. I'll move to the light here. So here's a weed. There we go. So that works really well, and that works really well when you're trying to get a weed out of a cactus patch. And
I suppose leather gloves are of no help.
They are of no help. In fact, it's a very bad idea because the spines will break off inside the glove and make it unusable because there'll always be that spine inside. Now, if you look here, you'll see there are virtually no weeds. This is a weed-free zone. And that is the best way to keep your cactus patch, because if you do have weeds, then you start to have to weed it a lot, and then you end up hurting yourself. So that takes me to this other tool. This tool is used by fishermen to pull hooks out of the throats of fish in order to release them, but it also is very effective for weed control, because it allows you to get right in there, grab a weed, and pull it out. Here's a weed right now, I think. And there we go. So, 3 tools that are useful. This one, and the tweezers for those little pockets. Now, it's a little early in the season, so I can't really show you a really good example, but these cactus are all called prickly pears. And why are they called prickly pears? Well,
Is that because of the fruit? Or?
it is because of the fruit. And many cactus have edible fruit. In fact, many of these have edible fruit. And so let's take a look over here. So if you look at this, you can see the flower, which was blooming last week, is on top. And then there is this thing down below. That is the fruit. So in a few months, it will be ripe, and there will be seeds inside. This variety doesn't really have edible pears. It has dry pears. But some of them have big, juicy, red fruit that actually are quite tasty. But those fruit are also covered by those little glochids, and so you have to make sure the glochids are off before you eat the fruit, because you don't want those glochids stuck down your throat. That is even worse than having them under your shirt. So let's look at some other varieties.
Sure.
So the prickly pear, they all have these pads. This one's nice. This one's called Red Teddy. And it has yellow flowers, so you say, well, why is it called Red Teddy? Well, it's because of the spines, you can see, are kind of a cinnamon reddish color. And some of the cactus actually have wonderful color on the spines. And late in the day or early in the morning, when the sun shines through, these plants actually glow. So here we have a live demonstration of a weed, which I've just spotted. And I'm going to get in there and try to get it out with the root. And here we are. One less weed, no spines, no glochids.
Nicely done.
Nicely done, exactly. So that's the prickly pear. And then we have the hedgehog varieties, and we can see one here. This one with beautiful red flowers. Unfortunately, most of them are finished from last week, and the new one hasn't quite opened yet. Claret cup is the common name for this variety of cactus. You can
Look
see.
at those wicked curved thorns on that.
Yes,
Or
spines actually.
Spines,
Yes, yeah,
not thorns.
that's right. Raspberries have thorns, cactus have spines,
And roses have prickles.
well, they're all prickly, aren't they? So you try to avoid them. This is a nice variety. It's a hybrid form, and it blooms for a long period of time. Some of the prickly pears don't bloom for very long, and some have an extended season. Prairie Fire is the name of this one. A fellow by the name of Kelly Grummins has hybridized quite a number of varieties, and that is one. This is a beautiful color. This one's called Persimmon, like the fruit, and I think the name quite accurately describes the color, wouldn't you think?
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah. It was a bad winter this year, so there was some winter damage. If you look at this pad here, you can see that there's some dead tissue on it. What can happen in a cold winter is some of the pads will die, but the plant will come back from roots lower down as well.
I noticed on this one, for instance, there's a purple coloring on
Yes.
the pad. Is that seasonal or is that varietal?
It's varietal and seasonal. So on many of these varieties, the coloration on the pads changes a lot for winter. So if I step over here,
Because I just
you can see
noticed
this guy here. So this one, that one is called Dark Night, and we have a very similar variety called Purple Desert. And in the wintertime, those pads get very intensely purple. And then, of course, they have wonderful magenta flowers as well. This variety is one of my favorites as well. I love the yellow-green chartreuse coloration on that.
Yeah, that color range. I mean, you really, what have you not got? Don't have blue, I suppose.
You don't have blue, and deep red or true red is also harder. But pinks and purples, yellows, oranges, peach, the persimmon. And don't lean against that cactus.
Thanks for having me back.
Yes, or you'll be sorry. So this is, I think, one of the most striking forms we grow, purple desert. The flowers are absolutely incandescently neon colored, and they're growing on pads that have that wonderful purple tinge. Spectacular. They really, really are eye-catching.
And who's this tubby little guy?
Okay, this is an Echinocereus, baileyi. This is another one of the hedgehog varieties, and it has beautiful big purple flowers, and of course, just like I said earlier, all those purple flowers bloomed last week. But if we go down the hill a little ways, we'll find some similar ones that are blooming right now.
I do have to compliment you on all this hardscape. This is lots of stone. That must have been a lot of work.
Yes, my wife Kelly did pretty much all the stone work there. My job was to fetch stones, and her job was to put them in place. So what you're looking at right now, that kind of a curved hillside, that's been in, I guess, for 10 years now. And that was our first cactus garden. But one of the things I've learned about cactus is that people who like cactus they kind of go crazy, and they want to have more cactus, and they want to have more varieties. And unfortunately, that craziness did affect me as well. And so I decided that, you know, if a few cactus are good, then more are better. And a few years ago, we decided to build a large garden here on the hillside, which is what we're just approaching now. My goal is to have Canada's largest outdoor hardy cactus garden. So until somebody tells me that theirs is bigger, I'm sticking with it. This is Canada's largest outdoor hardy cactus garden. And so there's a
Figure out who your competition is.
yeah. So there's a great deal of work that went into here, and without it's my wife Kelly's design, my friend Ewan's incredible engineering and hard work skills to build, and once again, my job here was mostly to carry rocks, and I can't tell you how many tons of rocks have gone into this hillside, but there are many.
All right, I'm dying to know, what is your high-tech secret for propagating cactus?
Okay. You sure I can tell you?
Yeah.
Okay.
You can trust me with it. I won't share it with anybody.
Well, let me just go over here. Okay. So let's say you love this cactus and you want to produce another cactus just like it, so that you have two. So here is the secret to how you propagate this plant. First of all, you need this handy tool. Then you take and you break off a pad. And then you have two different ways of propagating going forward. One is you can put it into the ground like that, or two, you can put it in the ground like that, and then you go away for a month. A month later, you come back, and that little cactus will have roots, and it will be growing. So there you go. Is that a good secret or what?
Yeah, that works.
I prefer this method because at least then the plant looks like it was planted, otherwise it looks like it was an accident. And so now you know why the fragilis that we looked at before break off in those little pads, because that's all it takes. Wherever they fall, that's where you will have a new variety or a new plant.
Thanks so much for having me out here.
It's been a pleasure. I love to share my enthusiasm for these cactus because I think, as I said, most people don't know that you can grow them in Canada, and They do actually thrive, and they require no care, no water. They're the perfect plant for lazy gardeners. Plant them, and as long as you keep those weeds under control, that's all you've got to do for a beautiful show.
Well, thanks so much for joining me for this tour of John and Kelly's garden up in Naramata, BC, and thanks so much to John and Kelly for their hospitality and for showing me around. This footage was delayed in putting out, so the intro was shot maybe 2 to 3 weeks ago. The tour itself happened right at the beginning of June, so that's around the peak of the bloom season for those cactus. Now, it goes without saying, this is John and Kelly's private residence, so I won't be giving out contact information, except to say that John still does sell the cactus pads online. I'll include that information in the links below the video. Again, thanks so much for watching, and now away from the tour videos and back to my regular topic videos for the next ones. Thanks so much.